Welcome everyone. So today we move on to the fifth module in the subject CE469 Environmental Impact Assessment. So this module mainly deals with the EIA methodologies. So the various methodologies that are adopted for the environmental impact assessment. So we have studied what is EIA. So EIA or Environmental Impact Assessment is defined as the study to predict the effect of a proposed activity or a project on the environment. So it is actually a systematic way of examining both the beneficial as well as the adverse consequences of any project, and it also ensures that these effects are taken into account during the project implementation or the design. It also, or we can say that it also helps to identify the possible environmental effects of the proposed project, proposes the measures to mitigate the adverse effects, and predicts whether there will be a significant adverse environmental effect. So this is what EIA is all about. So EIA methodology, what is EIA methodology? EIA methodology is actually an approach in order to develop uh, or to identify, to predict, and to value the changes of an action. So when a project is implemented, what are the various effects on the environment? So we have to identify it, or we can even predict the impacts, or we can value what are the changes that may occur due to this action. So this is an approach in order to develop or to identify these. We call it as the methodology, and these changes are actually reflected in the sequence of activities, the steps, as well as on the range of the environmental issues that are considered. So it may be physical, chemical, biological, socio-economic, cultural, etc. So EIA methodology is actually the structural approach for doing one or more activities of the EIA, and there are some specific characteristics which an EIA methodology should adopt or depict. So they are: it should be appropriate to the necessary task of the EIA process, such as identification of the impact or comparison of the alternatives. Then it should be significantly free from assessor's bias. So whoever is assessing this project impact, they should not be a biased one. The assessment should not be biased, and it should be economical in terms of the cost and its requirement of data, investigating time, personnel, equipment, and facilities. It should be economical in terms of all these. Now, we can also say that the development of the methodologies to assess the impact also depends upon the relationships between the territorial elements and also the actions, and also the specific measurements and the necessary information in order to estimate the impacts. So this is also one factor on which the development of a methodology will depend on. It also depends upon the mitigation measures, the compensation, and as well as the follow-up. So we can say that EIA methodology is an approach developed to identify, predict, and value changes of an action, and it uses methods and techniques to quantify or to qualify those changes. Change means the change after the project has been implemented. Now coming to the objectives of the methodologies. So these are the various objectives of EIA methodology. Firstly, to understand the nature and location of the project and possible alternatives. Then it also identifies the factors of analysis and the assessment objectives. So what is the objective, or what is the purpose of doing the assessment? Then it also then the preliminary identification of the impacts and the scoping, and prediction and assessment of the impacts and alternatives, that is comparison of the alternatives. Then it also depends on the mitigation, the monitoring of the impacts, and also the management of the impacts. So these are the main objectives of EIA methodology. Now coming to the next thing, that is impact analysis. So impact analysis is a stage of the EIA or the environmental impact assessment which identifies and predicts the likely environmental and social impact of the proposed project, and also evaluates the significance of the project. So this is what is meant by impact analysis: to analyze the, or to identify the or to predict the environmental issues due to a proposed project. Now, coming to the focus of methodology, when it comes to the focus of methodology, it actually, the methodology mainly focuses on generating a list of potential impacts on selected environmental components. So, it may be we will select a few components of the environment which can be affected by a project. So, we have to first we have to generate a list of the types of impacts on various types of selected environmental components. And also the methodology should be dynamic, it should be integrated group of natural and social systems, and also the type of impact over time and space. So we know that some impacts due to any project may be very immediate, the impact may be sudden or immediate, while there are other impacts which may be a long-term process or which may be a delayed impact. Also, there are some impacts which occur as a direct result of any activity. So when any project is implemented, directly it may affect the environment. There are other cases where it may be due to a secondary or a higher order impact which results from the changes in other environmental components. So it may be direct, or it may be a secondary one, or an indirect impact. So based on all these, we have to focus which type of methodology has to be adopted. Now coming to the different methods for impact analysis. So impact analysis mainly includes 3 steps. First is the identification of the impact, then prediction of the impact, and evaluation of the impact. So firstly we have to identify, okay, what is the type of impact, or what are the impacts, likely impacts. Then it also includes the prediction of the impact and then the evaluation. So these are the 3 steps. So impact identification actually attempts to answer the question, what will happen when a project enters its operational stage? So once a project is complete and it is being operational, then what next? This is what we have to identify, or this is what impact identification actually does. So a list of important impacts like the changes in the quality of the air, the quality or how it affects the water and the soil qualities, the noise level, then the other how it impacts the wildlife habitats, how it impacts the employment levels, etc. So we can prepare a list of the important impacts which can occur due to a particular project once it is operational, and the important sources of the impacts like the smoke emission, the consumption of water, or so many other things, whatever are the sources which leads to the impact can also be identified. So this is what is meant by impact identification. So what are the requirements for methodology? For EIA methodology, the following are the requirements. Firstly, we have to organize. So whenever you formulate a methodology, every method will include the organizing of a large mass of heterogeneous data. So before you prepare an environmental report, impact assessment report, you will adopt some methodology. Every methodology will need to organize a large mass of heterogeneous data that is available. And then we have to summarize these data. It has to allow the summarization of the data. And then the aggregate, we have to aggregate the data into small. Suppose the available data is too large, it has to be aggregated into smaller data sets so that we don't lose any information. So each and every information that is collected or available in the data should be taken into consideration. Then or also the target audience should be considered. So whoever is getting which the particular audience who or the people who are going to be affected should be considered. For example, if the target audience are not well educated, then we have to use if they're not able to read or write, then we have to use some codes, etc. Whenever you do a analysis or a study. So these are like the color code, the size, or you can use this cross, etc. Rather than that of figures or tables. So these are the various considerations or requirements of any methodology which is adopted for impact analysis. Now coming to the various methods. So like I told you, EIA methods will range from very simple to complex, and it also requires various kinds of data. The formats of the data may be different, and also it might require expertise which may be of varying levels. So the availability of the expert teams for doing a method or for analyzing or identification, we will use a team of expertise. So they may be of varying levels of expertise and technological sophistications. And so all factors should be considered when we select any method which is going to be adopted for impact studies. So these are the common methodology that are usually adopted. First one is ad hoc method, then we have the checklist method, the matrices method, overlays, and the networks. So we'll see what are each of these methods. So the first method, that is ad hoc method. So ad hoc method is actually one of the simplest method of EIA, environmental impact assessment technique. So ad hoc method actually indicates the broad areas of the possible impacts by listing the composite environmental parameters. So for example, the flow, how it affects the flora and the fauna. So it is a very simple method, and it is based on subjective environmental impacts on a very broad aspect. So this is actually useful whenever the time constraints and lack of information requires that the EIA must rely exclusively on expert opinion. So we can say that ad hoc method is a method where the report is generated or created mainly based on a expert opinion. So a team of experts will study the project, and then they will collect various data, and from their interpretations and from their experience and expertise, they will decide on what are the impacts. So it actually involves the assembly of various, like I told you, the specialists who will identify the impacts in their area of expertise. So there may be a team of experts. So each expert will be a specialist in some particular area. So then they will all sit together and decide and discuss and finally arrive at a conclusion. So each environmental area, like say for example the soil, area, air, water, etc., will be taken separately, and the nature of the impact will be predicted. And also here the impacts may be short term or long term. Also the impacts may be reversible or irreversible. So ad hoc method actually provides minimal guidance for the total impact assessment while suggesting the broad areas of the possible impacts. So whenever we need a more scientific method, suppose a project is going to be implemented, so we are going to do a methodology, or we are going to adopt a methodology which actually needs more scientific approach, then we cannot go for the ad hoc method, because in this case this is just a rough assessment of the parameters. So suppose a team of experts will assemble for a short time, they will conduct an EIA based on a unique combination of their experience, their training, and their intuition. So whenever we require a scientific method, or when more scientific methods are available, it is better not to rely on this method, that is the ad hoc method. So this is what ad hoc method is. So ad hoc methods may be of different types. They can be conducted in different ways, based on the opinion polls, based on the expert opinion. So polls by polling or opinion polls can be introduced. Then expert opinion or even the Delphi method can be adopted. So Delphi method means we know what is the Delphi process. Delphi process actually aims to determine the extent to which the experts or the lay people agree about a given issue with each other. So it is a process wherein the experts will give their opinion and the lay people have to agree, or how they agree about a given issue, and with each other in the areas where they are. And also they have to have a proper discussion, and usually the Delphi technique or the Delphi method is conducted through questionnaires. So questionnaires will be prepared and circulated. So based on this, the opinions of the experts as well as the lay people will be studied, and that is how they arrive at the conclusions. So these are the various types of methods in ad hoc method: opinion poll, expert opinion, as well as the Delphi method. Now coming to the advantages and disadvantages of ad hoc method. So there are various advantages as well as disadvantages. The main advantages of the Delphi method, the ad hoc method, is that the specialists on a particular area will provide guidance. So there actually a number of environmental components will first be listed. That also we have told. In this method, we will, in the first place, we will list a number of environmental components. So it will be very simple as well as easily understood, and also there will be a comparison of the requirements of alternatives. So this also is one advantage of the ad hoc method. Now the disadvantage is that it requires expert, then also it requires an expert, so we can't find an expert for all types of projects. It will be a difficult, or it's a drawback when we are not able to find a expert for a particular project. Then also the short term and the long term impacts are merely examined, and this is just based on guessing. So the experts will just guess, okay, this could be the short term effect, this could be the long term effort, long term effect. So this is just based on the guess. Then identification, prediction and interpretation of the impacts are very poor in this case, because it's all based just on the opinion of the experts based on their experience. So, and also it may not encompass all the relevant impacts, so it might not encompass all the impacts in general. And the criteria also used to evaluate the impacts are not comparable in this case. That is, in the ad hoc method, it is not, the criteria used to evaluate the impacts are not comparable. And it is actually, we can say it is inherently it is an inefficient way, as it requires sizable effort to identify and assemble an appropriate panel of experts for each assessment. So it will be, it's not a very easy task. And also it provides minimal guidance for the impact analysis, and it can never be replicated, and it is not very good in organizing and presenting the data. So these are the drawbacks of the ad hoc method. So that's all for today. So in the next class we will discuss the other methods of or other EIA methodologies like checklists, matrices, overlays and networks. Thank you.